Number 10. GAIL J. METWALLY. While fire is critical for survival and has become a normal part of life for humans, it's not something that should be taken lightly. It still has the potential to be incredibly deadly, which is exactly how a woman from Maryland intended to use it in April 2021. This was when 47-year-old GAIL J. METWALLY lit a match and set multiple houses on her street on fire. During the chaos, she simply pulled out a folding chair, set up in front of her yard, and kicked back to watch the fire do its work. She even lit the flames on her own property. Neighbors were horrified when screams coming from one of the burning houses was heard. Apparently, someone was trapped inside the basement of the home and was having trouble getting out as the smoke began to pool inside the residence. A witness recorded the scene from his phone and was heard on the footage yelling at the trapped woman to quickly get out. Thankfully, enough people were there to help her reach safety, and 2 other men escaped the blaze as well. Meanwhile, GAIL had gotten out of her comfy chair and tried to run away. She didn't get too far though, and police officers from Cecil County were able to detain her as firemen rushed to put out the neighborhood-wide inferno. GAIL was charged with arson, attempted murder, destruction of property, and more. A motive as to why the woman lit the flames has yet to come out, but we wouldn't be surprised if she was just crazy. Since May 2021, there have been few updates on this case, but we can only hope those affected by GAIL's actions receive the justice they deserve. Number 9. CIERRA FLORES. While Molotov cocktails are popular weapons in video games and riots, you don't hear about them being used too much in normal situations. But 35-year-old CIERRA FLORES was anything but normal. The San Antonio woman was arrested in 2021 on a Sunday night after trying to set a car on fire with a homemade Molotov cocktail. Her first attempt failed, causing her to grab a large trash can, fill it to the brim with gas, and light a match while it was under the intended victim's car. Later that night, after the burning vehicle was called in, police officers caught up with CIERRA. When they asked her, she openly admitted to setting the flames and even gave the detectives an in-depth version of what happened, adding in every little detail as if she was proud of the crime. During her telling of the story, CIERRA said that she even drove to a store after the incident to clean all of the gas off. In her creepy mugshot, CIERRA can be seen smiling like a maniac. Her eyes look like 2 soulless dark voids as she grins with both rows of teeth. It's believed that the owner of the car she burnt was her ex-boyfriend. She wanted to get back at him and thought this would be the best way to do it. In the end, CIERRA was found guilty of arson and will likely never be allowed near a match again. Number 8. Joseph KROMELIS. Most cities in the United States have large populations of homeless people. In Chicago, Illinois, one homeless man is well known in his community. 75-year-old Joseph KROMELIS, who's better known by his nickname the Walking Man, is often seen walking the streets downtown, so much so that people started to recognize him. While he was sleeping on the street one night in May 2022, someone poured flammable liquids on top of him before setting him on fire. When a witness noticed, law enforcement was called and Joseph was rushed to Northwestern Memorial Hospital. At the time, he was in critical condition after suffering severe burns all over his body. Thankfully, an overnight guard from a building close to where the incident occurred was able to put the flames out with a fire extinguisher. Later on, 27-year-old Joseph Gardia was arrested for the crime. The intentions and motivations as to why he targeted KROMELIS aren't known, but it's common knowledge for citizens of Chicago that living on the street is dangerous. Sadly, after spending months receiving treatment and trying to recover, the Walking Man was unable to pull through, and in December 2022, he passed away. The charges against Joseph were then raised from attempted murder to murder and arson, and for the time being, the case is ongoing. Number 7. QUISHON Brown. Many people think of their pets as their children, or at the very least members of their family. That's why it's so upsetting when individuals like QUISHON Brown hurt animals. During the summer of 2022 in Memphis, Tennessee, Brown was arrested for setting a small pit mix named Riona on fire. He poured gasoline all over the poor dog before lighting the flames. Witnesses that day say they saw Riona frantically running around in pain, trying to put the fire out. They tried their best to help her by hosing her down with some water nearby, and luckily, the pooch survived. However, Riona received burns that covered the majority of her body. The recovery process has been lengthy, but employees at the Tales of Hope Dog Rescue say that Riona is making steady improvements as the days go on. Apparently, Brown targeted another dog as well. At the time, he was out of police custody on bail, but he violated his bail requirements when detectives found out he had a new puppy. The conditions for his release strictly said that he wasn't allowed to get another dog, so he was once again arrested for animal cruelty. The puppy in question hasn't been found, but we can only hope it was left unharmed. Number 6. Lee Bowman. It's ridiculous how petty and entitled some people can be. In Sioux City, Iowa, during the month of May in 2021, 53-year-old Lee Bowman was furious with his neighbors. But why was he so angry? It was simply because they didn't mow his lawn for him. According to Lee, he'd asked his neighbors if they'd cut the grass on his property on a Saturday. The next day, when he realized they hadn't, he was enraged. So he went to their home and confronted them, asking why they didn't mow his yard. The man was so entitled that he truly felt like it was justified to get upset when someone else didn't cut his grass. And you might be wondering why he didn't grab a lawnmower and do it himself, but there isn't a good enough answer to that question. Lee took things so far that he set his neighbor's house on fire. A friendly bystander had to bang on the people's door to tell them that their property was in flames. Thankfully, it was noticed in time, so no one was hurt, and only a small portion of the home was damaged. Still, Lee was taken to jail on arson and criminal mischief charges. Firemen determined that the blaze was started from a piece of wood that was leaned up against the home and doused in flammable liquid. Lee was initially held on a $20,000 bail, but it's unclear what punishment he received for his senseless actions. Under what circumstances do you think it would be acceptable for Lee to ask his neighbor to mow his yard for him? Tell us what you think in the comments below. And while you're down there, hit the subscribe button to join the Bad Badger fam. Number 5. It's a fire. Gender reveal parties are becoming more popular for couples having a baby. Usually they involve creative ways to reveal whether the child will be a boy or a girl. This sometimes includes having pink or blue cupcakes, or popping a balloon or hitting a piñata, but some people take this way too far. In 2018, one couple who lived in the foothills of Arizona's Santa Rita Mountain decided it would be a great idea to use a smoke bomb to reveal their future baby's gender. Their intention was to shoot a sign and have it burst into either pink or blue smoke, but their plan didn't exactly work out. Dennis Dickey and his wife used tannerite to ignite the bomb. The issue is that the substance actually detonates and erupts in flames when shot by a gun. So when they fired a round at the reveal sign, a giant explosion lit a massive fire across the Arizona foothills. It didn't help that the area was mostly made up of dry, tall grass, and before they knew it, the Dickeys had burnt over 47,000 acres of land. Hundreds of firefighters and volunteers had to work around the clock to put out the flames. Helicopters and large water tanks were used, resulting in millions of dollars in damage control. Dennis was eventually charged with causing the fire without a permit and will be forced to pay out about $220,000. Oh, and just in case you were wondering, they were having a baby boy. Number 4. ARNAV GUPTA. The White House is a national monument in the United States, where whoever the president is at the time lives and runs the country. It's an incredibly secure site since it houses the person who's often referred to as the leader of the free world. With such a powerful reputation, the White House draws many visitors, and some of them, like ARNAV GUPTA, have bad intentions. In May 2019, ARNAV literally set himself on fire right next to the president's home, and he later died from the severe burns. A few days before the incident, ARNAV was reported missing. Police officers were actively looking for the 33-year-old man after speaking with his worried family. The authorities made a Facebook post to warn the public, saying that they were concerned, not only for the man's physical safety, but for his emotional welfare as well. In mere seconds after ARNAV lit himself on fire, members of the Secret Service surrounded him to put out the flames. They quickly moved him to the hospital where he was fully extinguished, but it was already too late. One of the witnesses there that day, a 17-year-old named Elena Berzins, spoke with a news outlet and said that she saw ARNAV running toward the White House while on fire. Luckily, things didn't get out of hand, but just imagine what would have happened if the building had gone up in flames. Number 3. DILLON SIEBERT. In February 2023, a 17-year-old boy named DILLON SIEBERT was found guilty of setting a house on fire 3 years before in August 2020. What he did resulted in the deaths of 5 people. Luckily, a security camera caught the boy and 2 others near the crime scene right after the home, where 3 Senegalese immigrant families lived, went up in flames. DILLON and his accomplices were seen wearing full outfits to hide their identities, complete with thick hoodies and face masks in the Denver summer heat. As the flames erupted, witnesses could hear terrified screams from inside. It was truly a horrifying scene as black smoke billowed out of the property's windows, and 3 different people jumped out to escape the heat. When the fire was eventually put out, the bodies of the 5 victims were discovered inside. Initially, it was believed that the fire was a hate crime, fueled by aggression. Later on, DILLON and the other minors, Gavin Seymour and Kevin Bui, were found to be responsible of the incident. They were charged as adults, since their actions were that serious, and each of the boys were accused of murder, attempted murder, arson, and more. Kevin claimed that before the incident, he was robbed. His defense said that the boy, who was only 16 at the time of the fire, had his shoes and phone stolen from him. He apparently was able to track his phone to the victim's address, causing him to think that the residents were the thieves. So he and the other boys set the fire. But unfortunately, he realized a day later that the people who lived there weren't actually the ones who stole from him. DILLON was sentenced to 7 years in jail, but the other 2 boys are still waiting for the resolutions to their cases. Number 2. GABRIELA PENALBA. Teachers nowadays have to put up with a lot. Not only do they essentially have to babysit large groups of children and teenagers at the same time, they also have to come up with lesson plans, deliver them in thoughtful ways to reach their students, and deal with rowdy kids. Sadly, in November 2013, a high schooler in Tennessee was arrested after trying to set his 23-year-old science teacher, Gabriela Penalba, on fire. In the middle of her lesson, Mrs. Penalba had her back turned away from the students while she was writing something on the board. During this time, the 15-year-old came up behind her and used a small lighter to set her hair on fire. Immediately, other kids in the room ran up to try and help their teacher, as the boy sat back enjoying the chaos. He allegedly tried to get rid of the evidence by throwing the lighter he used out a nearby window. But luckily, there were plenty of witnesses who saw what he did. The suspect wasn't named since he was a minor at the time, but he was later arrested for assault and evading arrest because he fled the school when police officers were called. Mrs. Penalba was new to the teaching game, and sadly it was her first year on the job. She was not seriously harmed from the incident, but the mental scars of having a student turn against her will likely sting for the rest of her teaching career. Number 1. Twitch. Have you ever yelled at your dog to get off the counter? Well, one pooch named Twitch learned his lesson the hard way on Christmas morning in 2022. The lab was caught by a security camera in the living room, sneaking into the kitchen to try and steal some cookies off the counter. While he may have gotten away with a few treats, he also accidentally hit a switch on the stove. The gas device then sparked a small flame, which ultimately grew into a larger eruption that spread throughout the home. At the time, the dog's owner, Megan Black, was at a relative's house to celebrate the holiday. Luckily, her fire alarm sent an alert to her phone, and she was able to call a neighbor and the authorities. That neighbor took immediate action, rushing to the home to grab Twitch and Megan's other dog. They took them outside to safety before running back into the smoke-filled home to throw some water on the fire. Miraculously, they were able to put it out before law enforcement got there. And while there was significant smoke and fire damage, no human or animal was harmed by the blaze. Have you ever accidentally set something on fire? Let us know in the comments below. And if you liked this video, be sure to leave a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. Thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you next time on Bad Badger.